So this is the last letter family in Gothic book script, Gothic textura or Gothic black letter. And these are the odds. These are the letters that don't fit into any of those families. So the letter F extends above the line for X height. Crossbar goes just underneath. So we start at the line for the ascenders, and you'll see we don't start completely at the top. I've given myself a little starting stroke there before I go on that downstroke, put a diamond on it. Then that gives me room to put on the little diamond at the top, turn the nib and do that little flick, which I've done in other letter families. Let me just show you why it's so important to start there, because if you don't, let me do it even more exaggeratedly, you don't have room to put on that stroke without having that little tiny fineness there, which is so characteristic of calligraphy. Calligraphy is this contrast between thicks and thins, and you want to make sure you've got that just there and not that. So don't start this letter too high up, because otherwise you won't be able to do that diamond and have that little shape there. The letter A can be, and I've done this in the letter family that's based on the letter O, a sort of conventional shape A, but this isn't really characteristic of the letter forms that were used in medieval manuscripts. They used what's called a two-story letter A. So we've got our letter A like that. Just tidy up that stroke. Then press to release some ink, and you might just be able to see the wetness of the ink there, so that you then, with the left-hand corner of your nib, pull that ink round to finish off that letter. I let it dry a little bit because I was so busy talking. So this stroke starts below the line for X height, and I'll show you why it should do that in a second. Keep it tight in, press there, use the left-hand corner of the nib to pull that round. Now, you need to start below the midpoint. There is about the midpoint for X height. If you start this letter too high up, first of all, that has to happen, so it's a different shape. And secondly, look how awful that letter is. So we certainly won't have that one. We start below the line for X height. Perhaps that's a little bit too low there, but better to be too low than too high. Press there and then pull that wet ink round using the left-hand corner of your nib. The letter X is a very narrow letter. It's really almost like a letter I, except for it has some slightly extending strokes, and then either a thicker stroke across the middle. Let me just do that again. We've got our diamond, a downstroke, the diamond at the bottom. We then have a narrow stroke, which is just taking the pen one way and then the other, to the right and then to the left at the angle of the pen, and then a thicker stroke, or, which is quite common in some medieval manuscripts, the letter X, with that going that way, that going that way, and then turn the nib completely so it's at 0 degrees and do two narrow horizontal strokes like that. Just do that again. Diamond down, diamond, put those strokes on, turn the nib so it's horizontal, 0 degrees, and two strokes like that. Letter Z, very, very rarely used in medieval manuscripts. Tight in letter, and again, either a stroke like that at the same angle or the two narrow strokes. Now, let me just explain what I did without talking about it on the first letter. I changed my nib angle from 45 degrees to a flatter angle for that second stroke of the letter Z. Then 2. And the reason I did that, because if we keep at the angle of 45 degrees, we get a very, very thin second stroke, and it does look slightly unbalanced in this letter family. So turn it so it's about 15 degrees, and then there's 2. And then the last one in this family of odds is the letter S. And the letter S is so many strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we start below the line for X height with a little stroke. Put on a diamond, put on another diamond, and then the downstroke which stops below the line for X height. We then have the curved strokes lighted on the letter P, top and bottom, and then that narrow stroke which should go from that top stroke to that bottom stroke and almost sort of finish off the letter, close the letter. Small stroke, diamond, diamond, downstroke, curved stroke, oops, and close it off. That actually isn't quite so good as the first stroke. This again is a difficult letter. Now before I finish, let me show you how to do the characteristic fish tail serifs of Gothic black letter. You'll see these in many medieval manuscripts, and they're not difficult to do. So having seen it, let me explain. We start with a curve from the right to the left, a downstroke, the bottom on the downstroke, then press within the letter to release some ink, and using that left-hand corner of the nib, again pull it up. Sometimes in medieval letters you can see that they almost flatten that off by a little bit of colouring in, but you don't need to do that. A downstroke, bottom, press within the letter and pull it up with the left-hand corner of the nib. And you can also do that, say at the bottom of a P, which is in reverse. So again to the left, press within the downstroke, and then you pull that out, in this case to the right. And that's what's called a fishtail, and you can see quite clearly why it is. Let me just finish off that letter P. Don't like to end on a not complete letter.